Hi, everyone. If you are here for Martechify Integrative Analytics, you're in the right place. Welcome.
My name is Tina Schweiger, and I am the expert finder for Martechify. And I would love to give us an overview of why we are here for Martechify. If you can forward. We exist to bring you the best expertise in digital marketing from experts who are actually practicing in the field. Our next session after this is going to be part 2 of Pragmatic AI, and we'll bring back Tommy Marzans and John McElhaney for more discussions and demos on AI that you can use right here and right now. As we go through the session, feel free to add any questions to the Q&A and chat, and I will include them in the Q&A that we will have at the end. And without further ado, I'll introduce Rich Herbst, our founder and the leader of Ascend Marketing. He will moderate our session and get started with introducing our speakers today.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Martechify. Excited to jump into this session today on integrative analytics. And we have 2 fabulous experts. Let me just do a quick mention of each. Mark Childs is today founder and CEO of Childs Co., and they do custom solutioning around data platforms, analytics, etc. So spot on for what we're talking about. I'll also mention that Mark was previously an executive leader at Hart Energy. So he's lived for many, many years in client-side shoes and is very comfortable speaking from that perspective. Stefan Bajau, he is right now co-founder and CEO of Vibe Logic. This is a new firm focused on SEO. In the past, he's been an executive leader at Turno. So both gentlemen here can provide deep expertise as providers of service, but they also have lived in client shoes and can speak from that perspective. And I think today's discussion, we're going to try our best to put ourselves all in client shoes so that we can go deep and understand what this work looks like from the real world perspective. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Let's skip ahead. I'll just do a quick setup here. Our last session, if we can go back, our last session was Pragmatic AI for right here, right now. That was in February. Tina mentioned that we have our next session coming up in May, which is a continuation of Pragmatic AI. Hope everybody can join us for that. Today's session is integrative analytics, platforms and tools. We'll move through some framing considerations. We'll move into use cases and scenarios. And then we'll have some processing of all that in the latter part of the discussion. As a reminder, please make sure you have your chat window open on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Tina will be moderating the chat. And we're hoping that everybody can put in questions and comments, insights. Tina will be moderating that, and she'll bring those kinds of questions and comments into the live discussion so we can put it all together. Without further ado, let's jump in. So I'll share a couple framing thoughts, but we'll get our experts sharing here very quickly. So when we're talking about analytics, integrative analytics, what are we talking about? Well, it's analytics that reaches across channels, across platforms. It kind of connects the dots. And why is that important? Well, here's 3 classic needs that we see being solved for. Attribution modeling is a great big one. Audience insights. And then customer journey experiences. Customer experience and customer journey. 3 very, very prominent needs that client organizations have that call for integrative analytics. There's probably more. We're going to dive into that as we go. When we kind of look through the lens of what problem are we trying to solve, almost universally, data islands. Data trapped in platforms, data trapped in different systems. Getting all that data collected into a common environment for integrative reporting and assessment, that's the challenge. One more slide, framing here. When we think about what kind of technologies might be brought to bear on this, a set of obvious ones, and this is not an exhaustive list, but certainly the CRM platform, automation platforms, you can do a lot within them. Google Analytics, GA4, widely used, pretty much an essential part of most organizations' stacks. data visualization tools, Tableau, similar, integrative analytics tools, customer data platforms, master data platforms, master data management platforms, cloud data platforms. I'd like to make sure we talk a fair bit today about tools like Snowflake and similar. AWS, Azure, GCS, data lake solutions, all of which can lead to in-house solutions. So there's quite an array, quite a lot of technology here. Gentlemen, experts, can you, anything I'm skipping here, anything like you'd like to add to the picture so far?
I think it's not a fully exhaustive list, but it's enough to keep my head spinning.
Pretty good start.
Well, and I think everybody's tech stack is going to be different, and there's always going to be the legacy systems that they have in-house to work through, as well as, like you said, the data silos, but trying to bring all those together is going to be very difficult. And some companies aren't going to have maybe a majority of these tools. So I think we'll talk about some optionality related to what they can do without having those too.
Yeah, perfect. Let's scoot forward then. Let's just share a bit, guys. When you think about the challenges, like, isn't this something you kind of just buy a tool and light it up and boom, you have integrative analytics? I think we all know it's harder than that. As we go into the whole discussion here, what are the challenges or traps or issues that typically organizations are going to expect as they get into more integrative analytics?
I'll let Mark do this because my entire section is about to be about the data.
So, yeah, there's a bunch. Obviously, there's technical challenges related to the data silos, your data quality. Dirty data is going to always be a challenge, dirty in, dirty out, unless you have a way of figuring out the transformation of that data. Entity resolution. If you have two people with the name John Smith, are they actually the same person or are they two different people? You got to be looking at different data attributes on how to actually associate those being two different records or being a unified customer. And we'll look at some of that here in a little bit too. Privacy and security challenges. What are the regulations and the data requirements that different industries have? That's a huge one that really has to be taken up front before you actually start a big data integration project. If you don't know what you are supposed to do or not supposed to do, you have to be very, very careful about what data can actually be seen across your platforms and who has access to it within the company. That's a really big one. Obviously, it's a big one as well. Yeah, GDPR, CCPA, different regulations related to, say, like financial institutions and things of that nature. That all has to be taken into account. And then, what's your skills gap look like? What does your team makeup look like internally? Or do you need to hire a partner to help you come in and actually manage that? Those are just some of the, I would say, 30,000 foot bullet points to kind of put together related challenges.
Yeah, it's a little daunting, isn't it?
It definitely can be.
Well, good deal. Let's roll ahead, and I'd like to get into some real life. So I think we'll have you lead off, Stefan, and
sure.
And just to share with everybody, Stefan's he's a CEO. He's been in senior marketing leadership roles as well. I think he's going to put a executive lens on our challenge here, and at least to get all the issues out in the open. So fire away, Stefan.
Sure. All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Stefan Bajayo. I should probably give you a sense of who I am before we jump in, or I give any thoughts or on this. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So I started my career, at least in search. I've been in digital marketing since the heyday, since literally the first websites made their way for e-commerce onto the internet. Was part of the dot-com boom and bust. I made my way into organic search actually in 2008. Helped ultimately start a company called Conductor, which is an enterprise SEO platform. Then within that set, being one of the co-founders, I kind of went off and started a pro services team within that. We landed WeWork as one of our many enterprise clients. They then bought us. We then bought ourselves back from them. So I've seen the insides and outsides of very large companies. I've also been the one across the table from, I'll probably say tens dozens, I can't say hundreds, but close to CMOs of Fortune 500 and that retail 1000 companies. And after we bought back Conductor, we actually got it valued in its first new round at about $500 million. So that was pretty nice. And then I became a Conductor alumni, and then I ended up falling into a CMO role at an ex-Conductor's company called Turnover B&B, which was in the short-term rental space. And ultimately, I had to kind of build a marketing team from scratch. So I had to apply everything I'd kind of seen done over here in the real world. And having done that, I then decided to go off and start FiveLogic, a search agency. So let's get into a little bit of, what it's like to be the CMO role in this process and what the real pain points look like. So if we can just go to the next slide. This is what the CEO thinks I'm doing, right? The CEO honestly thinks that the CMO is just like taking the money and throwing it around. But in reality, we are really trying to do this. And it sucks. I mean, you'll see the guy, if you can kind of see him through there with a head in his hands, he's still in front of a pile of money, right? I still have a budget. The problem is I have to decide where to spend it. And multi-channel is a real issue because, as you can see here, there are so many ways that I can spend this money. This actually comes right out of Gartner in terms of where CMOs are saying this year they're going to be spending their money, what they're going to be increasing on and decreasing on. What I think is most important to recognize here is this isn't just when you look at each one of these things. There's a technology behind it, if not one, maybe two, maybe three, right? There's resources against it. So there's actual people in certain cases that do each of these things, or it's one fraction of someone's job, right? And then in addition to all of that, add the idea that you have budgets that are supposed to be broken down, and we're supposed to figure out the ROI of each of these things, right? Because we spend on it, we spend time, treasure, or talent against it. So that becomes the heart of the problem of the CMO right now, which is, okay, push-pull. Where do I go? Where do I place my bets, right? Now we can go to the next one. What you'll see is right now CMOs are saying, at least from Gartner's CMO survey, is that most of our spend is going to be spent in the consideration or conversion stage, which is a little bit sad. I've got to be honest with you, depending on the type of business you are, because what that means you're not actually focused on it. You're really focusing at the bottom of the phone, right? You're crowding the register and making sure you're grabbing every possible lead and converting it that you can, which I get, because that validates your existence. It validates your team's existence. It validates those heads, that budget, all of that, right? However, it does miss out on the idea that brand is what first starts many of these things and greases the wheel of industry, in all fairness. So brand is not being spent as much on. And then there's the other side, which is unless you're one of these businesses that frankly are rare and only want to sell someone one thing once, there is a funnel afterward. There is a life after attribute or an attribution post conversion. And so somehow, unfortunately, in many companies, we say, well, that's customer success, that's customer service, that's customer marketing. That actually is not me. That's a fallacy, frankly. So I don't love seeing this slide. It wasn't a happy thing for me to see because I think there's a whole world of if you're not doing your brand, you're in trouble. And if you're not maintaining your customers, then it's just a leaky bucket and you keep having to fill it. And then you kind of, as a CMO that probably always has a lifespan of about 2.5 years, which is the average, I think, these days of a CMO, it's important to think through that. So let's go ahead and kind of look through on our next slide let's go ahead and look through what an attribution process kind of looks like, right? Or how I'm trying to figure it out. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. All right. So right now, the customer journey, right, how this works, many times before it was a ladder, right? If you had a channel, you're following the same channel and you're kind of going through that. The problem is we've added so many channels, right? So now our ability to see these things is like, what should I be focused on as the CMO? You saw that list of many things I could place my bets on. In the meantime, I'm supposed to be able to tell the CEO or executives who are probably breathing down my neck saying, well, what's the ROI we've gotten in any one of these kind of things? And in the meantime, they don't have to go like a ladder. It's a jungle gym. So to be able to figure this all out, if you go to the next slide, this is kind of what it feels like. Whoop, you skipped. Back. There you go. That's what an attribution model looks like. The odds, this is a Rube Goldberg machine, right? The odds that it is going to work every time, no fail, no issue. I mean, I love you if you're in that situation. God bless you. But I have not been in that situation. And I'll tell you, there is always someone that's going to tell you, well, you know what? You're not factoring in, and then 17 different things that weren't in the Rube Goldberg machine to begin with. And so you're like, oh gosh, and now, you're trying to defend, validate. You spend so much time, if you think about it as a CMO, trying to justify the bets you made, that being able to justify them, forget like the analysis. It's actually just trying to justify whether or not you're being told the truth, because everyone's going to, frankly, validate or want to validate their role, their numbers, their stuff. Everyone's going to tell you their channel is the most important. And you obviously want to believe your team and you want to believe numbers, but then they may not line up to what you're seeing on the revenue side. So then it becomes this crazy mishmash of which one of these little things along the way didn't add up. So if you go to the next slide, you're going to see this is the kind of like, I am trying, it's kind of like I'm using gunpowder to make gold, right? And I'm hoping I'm not going to blow myself up, because each one of these, like I said, each one of these channels comes with its own metrics, its own systems, and they don't talk to one another. They don't align. They conflict many times. And so which product do I agree with? Which one do I believe in? Which one has more credibility in the eyes of my executive team, right? Can't tell you how many times I've been through the idea that mixed panel tells me one thing, and that's a source of truth. But then I've got GA4 telling me something completely different, but I'm comparing it to the original Google Analytics that existed before the dreaded GA4, frankly, shows up. So now I've got like all of these data sets conflicting. I've got certain ones they believe in, other ones they want to throw out the window. And you were going on fool's errands trying to figure some of this stuff out. So basically, if you think, when you think about where we're at as CMOs, go to the next slide. This is kind of it. It's time. So let's go to the next slide. This is going to hurt. MarTech budgets are being cut. This is what Gartner is saying. And basically, the CMOs are being pressured to leave or at least cut back. And I think it's important for me to rattle these off real quick. Cut investments because of continuous improvements and optimizations of existing MarTech solutions. Reduce investments in services focused on installing and integrating MarTech solutions. Cut investments in planned net new MarTech solutions, and reduce investments in managed services supplied by MarTech vendors. Okay, so if I can just translate that into human speak, that means we are going to stop moving forward on many of these products because we think that it's not worth taking them to a further degree. We're going to reduce the service of any correct installation or process of putting them in place. The managed services teams from these products that know these products best, we're going to cut that down. And then we're going to say that we hope this all works. So let's go to the next slide, because this is where it's going to really kind of come together. And I think this will kind of nail it for us, which is there is an obstacle, an impediment right now to marketing technologies getting utilized. So what we call, and Mark said this the other day when we were kind of prepping like this, the $1 million paperweight, right? So you've got this product that's really expensive, and the complexity and sprawl of your overall marketing ecosystem is the number one thing stopping you from being successful. Meaning like you don't know what to pick out of that to go get your answer. Then there's the lack of strong customer data function to enhance the business value of the technology. So even if you did know where to focus, you don't necessarily have the analyst who can actually take that and convert that into, from tech speak to exec speak, right? So then we're missing translation. Then we have inflexible governance, which inhibits innovation, right? So many of you may have run into this. So cool, I want to infuse AI into my business, except my business won't let me do it. So now that's a technology arm I can't touch. And then it's a question of, well, does your product use AI in it? So now I have to reconsider, well, where does that AI go? And where, much to the degree of where does data go? So now that's a whole new thing I now have to consider. And then, sorry, you guys can see the pain, right? That's the purpose. The difficulty of identifying and recruiting marketing talent that actually knows this stuff. Like, I showed you a periodic table of insanity. Good luck finding someone that really knows all those things, right? Or a fraction of them, to be frank. Or that's going to fit in a budget, by the way, while you're in budget cuts. So the reality of the situation is, this is all fun. Not to mention, if you really want to feel my pain, go to the next slide. Hopefully this all resonates if you're old as I am, right? But I'm also being told that AI is going to come in and take away all of our jobs. So when it comes to where a marketer's head is right now, especially an executive, as to what's going on and what I need to believe, what I don't need to believe, where I need to be focusing, if I need to be looking at the future, looking at the past, or understanding what the heck happened, I really need a sense of integrated marketing, integrative analytics to carry me through all of this. Because I honestly don't have the time to figure it all out, and everyone on my team is figuring their own stuff out. If you're kind of structured that way, which most companies are, right? Silos should be for grain, not for marketing, but unfortunately that's the world we live in.
Good stuff. Well, thank you, Stefan. Excellent. Boy, I'm left with two impressions here. One is that leadership levels of marketing have to demonstrate results. You have to show that the investments are bearing fruit. As you come down a level, you need to know which investments are more productive, which are less. So optimizing your marketing, which affects all marketers, huge challenge. But then, and those are must-dos, has to happen. But then you kind of turn around and face tangle of MarTech tools, tangle of data that doesn't want to harmonize. Organizational challenges. I mean, nice job of painting that all out, but that's daunting. That's a lot.
Thanks, Rich. I missed one key point, which I didn't have here, which I should have just put an asteroid, right? Which is, that's the executive shiny object syndrome. So, influencer marketing, I saw my competitors do something or whatever, and all of a sudden now, your headspace, your plan, they say the best plans until someone, fires the first shot kind of thing, right? Best laid plans. You have a plan. You know what you're doing. You're trying to move it and incrementally forward. You're trying to decide which of those things to make the bets on, to your point. But then you will get an asteroid that comes out of nowhere, unprepared. We're partnering with this company, or we're doing this, and all of a sudden, there goes that plan. We now need to add new metrics. TikTok is our new thing. How do we manage that? So on and so forth. So it's you do have to have your head on a swivel, and I like to try and, I can hold 20% back in my planning. I do, just for that reason. But then that usually gets eaten up with analytics to try and figure out what the heck happened.
Yeah, fair points. Thank you. Excellent. And shiny objects. Oh my goodness. And there are shiny objects lurking around our subject here today. Oh, here's a tool that we just turn this thing on, pay the license fee, and boom, we're going to have all this data handling just magically solved. All this integrative reporting, those kind of claims are certainly out there too. So let's bridge over to Mark. Mark, you might have thoughts on what Stefan just shared. Hopefully we're giving you a bit of a setup here to come in and talk about how do we take on these challenges.
Yeah, that's going to be hard to follow. So great job there, Stefan. So my name is Mark Childs. I'm the founder and CEO of Childs Co. Obviously, the branding is a little different, but if you watch the show Succession, you'll understand that the Roy family had Waystar Royco, so Childs Co. fits. I've spent the last 23 years in progressive IT and digital operations roles. I spent 15 years at Hart Energy, which is a media company here in Houston, covering oil and gas, and I was the director of IT there, moved to the CIO role. Shortly thereafter, I became the CTO and took over the software engineering side. And then in 2016, I went over to the dark side of business and became the chief digital officer, where I then had business P&L responsibilities. So not only did I still have IT and software engineering, but I also then had sales and marketing and a multi-million-dollar business line to manage. So I have a lot of things that I brought to the table related to customer service, having been a PC support tech early in my career, kind of understanding the empathy of what people are going through, especially related to technology. I rolled out the Windows 2000 rollout to about 2,000 people in my first job when I was 18. And so that kind of set my trajectory into the technology atmosphere. So here we are, 2 decades later, still going strong at it. So what I am going to cover is more specifically related to how a customer journey can kind of be mapped within ours was a digital media environment, but the same methodology will still kind of apply throughout, I think, several of the businesses. So can you go to the next slide? So this next few slides are going to be related to digital media subscribers and the customer journey that you could see related to data platforms. So let's take a look at my customer journey slide, which is not as busy as Stefan's, but it still tells the story. You see the customer is obviously in the middle, but their journey can be so many different things. They could have come from social media. We could have done a direct mail campaign, email campaign. They could have come to us from a conference. They may have seen that by way of an email. Are they a subscriber? Are they not a subscriber? How can we get them in front of more products? Like Stefan said, most of our customers, we're not just trying to sell them one thing and to be done. We want to keep them. We want to nurture them and engage them to keep them expanding their lifetime value with your organization. So we had, several different business lines from free subscriptions to paid subscriptions, both on a print side and a digital content side. Then we had conferences. We had a research and consulting division, and we had a GIS division. And so we were trying to really formulate a plan on being able to get in front of people and let them know of all the different brands that we had and walk them up the chain. Obviously, the easiest one to get them into is become a free subscriber to something. Basically, give us your email address. And then how can we then walk them up the chain through different nurture campaigns to become a print subscriber, which was, our lowest paid product for a subscription, or get them into a conference, which had some of the best ROI that we had in the organization, because at the one time, and we can get them to go, we had, I think, 15 conferences at once. So if we can get somebody to go to 2, 3, 4 conferences, that drastically changes their lifetime value with the company versus having a single paid subscription forever. I mean, there's a benefit to both of those, right? But we also needed to see that. So one thing that you can look at is, what do you associate as a customer? What do you associate as a prospect? And then how do you tie that together? So if we go to the next slide, there's a real sense of data. What questions can data answer? And there's a lot of them. Like for us, we needed to see how many subscribers logged on to one site, because at the time we actually had multiple paid sites, and we would have people that would have multiple paid subscriptions, or they may have a free subscription to one and a paid subscription to another. So we needed to see that. How many of those subscribers then even log into multiple sites? Sometimes you pay for something, you forget you have it, you don't use it, hit your credit card every month, and then you're like, I don't want to be pestered with canceling it. So there's that. But we also wanted those people to stay engaged, not just get paid, paying us for something, but not using the product. That's not providing any value to them. Sure, we wanted to take their money, but not that way, right? We wanted to make sure that they found value in what they were paying for. So then also, from the print subscriber side, back in the day, you'd get a magazine and there would be a card in it to send a year subscription. Well, changing that model to get people to sign up online at least gives you their email address. So now you can have something and specific attribute that you can associate from that offline subscriber, that print subscriber, to an online publication. So now you have a more robust way of knowing your offline to online folks, which comes to the attribution modeling that Stefan showed earlier in his slides. That attribution modeling is really, really important because you need to understand where people are coming from and where you're getting your benefit from your marketing spend. What are you really getting a benefit from versus not? Where are you throwing all that money away, right? So those are some of the real big questions that come to play. And then there's, gated content, registered users logging in. How many articles did it take for somebody to look at before they actually decided to pay for a subscription? All those really come into play. And then from that, if you look at it from the conference side of the business, how many people attended previous conferences? How many of those are new folks? How many do you get to come to multiple conferences a year? Or maybe they came last year and they're not coming this year. Is there a different message that you can send to them? Those are some of the real specific details that data can answer if you know the questions to ask. That's really where some of the crux comes in related to integrative analytics, is sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So it's very hard to quantify the sometimes very exorbitant spend on some data platforms. I won't go through all of these. I think you guys will be able to get the presentations, but this is just to kind of give you an overview of what data kind of looks like. So if we go to the next slide, then you can kind of see how this can come together related to having a CDP, a customer data platform, in the middle of your stack. So over here on the left, this is your sales and marketing side, whether that's Salesforce, say it's your email platform, Marketo. A lot of people are using Shopify for their e-commerce stores. Cvent is a conference registration platform. But then you also have your websites with your different tags there, any mobile apps that you have. Those could potentially flow into a CDP. And then you have your legacy systems. What do you have as far as your own internal databases, whether that's it could be an Access database, it can be an Excel file, anything that's housing data. What do you need to get into, your data realm, in essence, to make sure that you're being able to understand who your customers are? Really, the question is, how many customers do you have? And being able to unify that data in some fashion is going to be really key. And then you want to be able to push that data back out. So, for instance, data visualization tools, Tableau, Power BI, Looker, Stitcher, there's so many different ones. But you need to be able to visualize that, because if you just look at a bunch of raw table data, there's not much that you can get from that. And that's where, an analyst can really kind of help to orchestrate what that data looks like. And then now that you've brought in your first party data, you can also have third party data come in as well. Architect, gender, age, who people are, what's their earning opportunity, do they have children, what's their status, their marital status, occupation, different interests. Those sorts of attributes are all going to be really key so that you can then activate on them. So reverse ETL. So now that you have everything in, what do you want to do with it? You can send it out to an ad network or doing specific targeting based on those interests or key attributes. You may want to send very specific messages by way of email. You want to be able to make sure that, hey, you're hitting the female organization or people that are your customers with a message related to females. Say we had a women in energy event. Well, it doesn't necessarily pan out well for sending a ton of emails to your male subscribers or your male counterparts if that's not really of interest to them. So now it's really getting to the point of being very, very targeted. ABM used to be a big buzz term, but really this takes you really to the next level now of being able to be very, very specific in who you want to reach with what specific message. Do the same thing, you can do that with actually changing your product outlook. You can personalize your product with different tools. I know that Optimizely is not necessarily the one to use anymore but different personalization tools. You can even change the look of your website based on people's different interests and things of that nature. Or if you have a newsletter, maybe you want to have a dynamically generated newsletter that's based on people's interests as opposed to you get all the links or you get all the content. Maybe they don't care about all that. Maybe there's a very specific subset of what you're putting out that they want to read. So let's go to the next one. It will kind of talk about this in a more granular matter on user personas. So user personas or user profiles, that's really what you're going to be able to get from impactful data like this. And so you can use a data platform for creating specific user personas using machine intelligence and different data science components. One thing that was really paramount for us was getting in front of executives, because we were more of an executive type content play throughout the oil and gas industry. However, if the marketing team just came up and said, hey, we want to reach all the CEOs, well, CEO is one specific title in that maybe one specific attribute. But if you look at it from a data perspective, there's probably other people that would be in that realm. So being able to pull all that data in, you want to use that attribute like title to be able to understand, is it just CEO? Is it president and CEO? Is it president? Is it owner? Is it founder? Those sorts of things all kind of come into play related to the leader of the company. That's really what you're trying to target, not necessarily just the title of CEO. So getting the marketing team to kind of think in that realm was drastically different than just very specific title association. And what that provided was a perfect example to create a specific and targeted campaign and the right marketing message to reach those folks, as opposed to just spray and pray mentality that a lot of times ends up happening. You know, Stefan can tell you, I'm sure, from the email marketing side, let's just get in front of everybody, right? Volume is key. Well, not necessarily. So on the next slide, you'll be able to see how these data attributes kind of came to play as you pull all that together. So you can see there's president, there's unknown. Sometimes we would have other attributes related to a person's profile that we didn't have their title. However, we would know that they were the leader of that company by some other form of data attribute that we had pulled in or inferred from other platforms. But again, there's president, different variations of how president is actually put into the system. So you have lowercase president, and then you have another one further down that's all uppercase. If you have a very specific targeting way of looking at it, you will possibly miss that. If you just looked at only that one president association, you would miss all those other folks. So you want to make sure that you're thinking in terms of a broad approach related to data attributes as opposed to very, very specific targeting. And what that will allow you to do is be specific in your targeting. So from there, we'll look at how this data can also be used for churn probability. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure, related back to that customer journey, was keeping our paid subscribers. Getting them is the hardest part. Keeping them should be easy. So you also wanted to be able to look at what you were defining as a current subscriber, and obviously defining expired subscribers is fairly easy, but you need those two kind of lists to create your control, and then you can put them together in your data platform to use machine learning to understand who are the people that are unlikely to churn, marginally, possibly, and likely to churn. So those last three tiers are really where you need to focus your nurturing and engagement efforts. If they fall into a bucket, say they don't come to your site for 15 days or 30 days or 45 days, maybe they are in one of those three buckets on the marginally, possibly, or likely to churn. Well, that's low-hanging fruit in theory. The marketing team should definitely be looking at those folks and saying, okay, let's stay in front of them. Let's make sure that they're coming back to the site. You could be doing it from a specific automation standpoint, like, okay, if this unique ID, it could be an email address, or with some of the different data platforms, you can get an ID related to anonymous users that you can then reach, and then be able to tie that back to some other component within your data algorithm to say, oh, that anonymous user is this email address. Let's go get in front of them. Those things are going to be really key, specifically related to how you implement some of these data techniques within your website. That you can use Tag Manager, Google Tag Manager, or it could be custom built in. A lot of them will allow you to actually pass different custom attributes specifically from your website back to your data platform, so that you can now tie all of that to the user experience, the customer journey, and more importantly, what's the behavior they're doing on your site. So for instance, say you're a financial institution and you have people that have a single deposit bank account, but you also do car loans, you do home loans. Do they ever go to those portions of your site? If they do you have maybe a different discount that you could provide to them, or maybe an incentive like, hey, we'll give you $100 for signing up for a savings account, something like that. That can all be attributed to that one specific user. You can have a bunch of different messages and options related to what you want to tell that person, or what you want to get to that person, to be able to get them to increase their usage of your products. Again, it comes back to customers' lifetime value. What are the specifics that you can learn from their behavior and be able to attribute that to the next steps of keeping them engaged, nurturing, and then obviously increasing your revenue. What's going to be your compounding annual growth rate if you do all this? And that's really where it comes back to measuring success. What are you trying to measure related to your ROI and success for doing any sort of data and integrative analytics implementations? In the next slide, it just shows a quick association of some of the companies that we were looking at related to the users within those companies that were either likely or unlikely to drop off from their subscriptions.
All right, good deal.
That was a lot.
So, Mark, no, thank you. I think we got a good look at what these analytics can look like. Talk a little bit. So this one you helped build out, and you were using a CDP. I guess
right.
Treasure Data in this
Treasure
case.
Data.
Whole range of CDPs available, though. So I guess my question is, A, how sufficient was the solution? Was it technically? Using that approach, and then B, do you have, if you were not able to procure a CDP, how else might you think about solving for the integrative analytics?
Yeah, so for us, it was interesting. It took probably about 6 months to really get up and running with Treasure Data, when we brought it in, and it performed very well. We ended up, unfortunately, during COVID, as we had to cut everything, we actually did cut off Treasure Data for about 2 years. We had to, go full-blown skeleton mode, cut as much as we absolutely could. But we did bring it back in 2022, and it was, again, a robust platform. So the thing is, there's several different CDPs, and they all, to a certain extent, do the same thing, but they all have their kind of own specialties. And there are some CDPs now that are very, very specific related to specialties. Like, for instance, there's one called Orbi, and it's kind of a jack of all trades. It has the CDP, it has an EMS system, it has an ad system, and it's really dedicated to the automotive industry. Some of the others, they have, like, for instance, Treasure Data is an enterprise level CDP, and you can do a significant amount of data science and data analysis within it. And it also has its own data visualization tool called Treasure Insights. However, it has connectivity to, probably a good 80 to 100 other platforms that you could push the data back out. Now, if you don't have the budget for a CDP, which I can absolutely understand that, because it's not necessarily the most inexpensive endeavor. However, there are some that I would recommend that you can start at a much lower price point, or even free to a certain extent. Like RudderStack is one. It's an open source platform. Segment, that one is from Twilio. You can start small and scale up with that one. So there are a couple of different options related to budgetary constraints. However, one of the challenges that I see that most companies run into is just the technical aptitude of their internal team. Trying to do this without the right technical ability within the organization, you're setting yourself up for failure. Again, this comes back to a very expensive way. Yeah.
I was literally about to say that, because you were a luxury, Mark. They had you, right? Like, they had like the expert in that, Treasure Data could get set up. But I think if people are going to go and put these kind of like these solutions in place, especially if they're going to spend money on them, this is the kind of solution where I think if you don't have someone specifically dedicated, you're probably going to spin your wheels. That, or you're going to end up eating whatever resource you intended on them doing it fractionally if they're really trying to deliver for you. I mean, you probably have a few stories about that, like companies that thought they could take on a CDP, and then all of a sudden it like ate up 3 people's time, and then they bring in an expert because they're like, we didn't realize how complex this was going to be.
Okay, so that's actually a really good point. Yeah, related to the skill set, you have to have people that are dedicated to it. Even if they do have a skill set, a lot of companies do have data analysts and data engineers. They don't necessarily have time to go and do an implementation on top of their regular job.
Yeah.
Right. And the technology here is not a magic bullet. A CDP, of course, the sales pitch is always how easy it is, how everything's pre-built, but it's not a
every one of them
exercise, right? There's complexity. It takes some chops, technical chops.
But I mean, most companies still, they don't necessarily have to have that. I mean, you could still have some non-platform stuff. I mean, Excel, obviously, use Excel for many, many things. You don't want it to handle everything, but there are still a lot of things that you could do with Excel. You could connect it to Power BI. You can end up having a lot of that data straight from Excel into a data viz tool. It's not going to be as robust. You're not necessarily going to be able to do all of the data standardization and unification that you may want to do, but it definitely is a step in the right direction. Google Sheets, Smart Sheets, Microsoft Access, that's been around for years and years and years, and a lot of people end up getting that just with their Office license. So there are some non-CDP centric, platform or non-platforms, if you will, but there are some other platforms like just that aren't CDPs, but they're data lakes, right? You have Snowflake, you have Databricks, you have AWS Redshift, Realtio, that's kind of a master data management platform. So there are some other opportunities related to not just implementing a CDP. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a CDP for everybody. I don't necessarily think that every company has to have a CDP. What I do think you have to have a handle on is your first party data.
Yes. And that's what I was about to jump in on and say, I think the exercise of preparing for a CDP, the data cleanliness part of this is so overlooked because it's part of trying to get to a goal versus the actual value of just going through that exercise. So if you think about it, it's almost like sedentary layers, right? Depending on which version of marketing, depending on how old your marketing department is, depending on which channels you've collected what data in, right? And so we had a field for this. We didn't have a field for that. When we got this data in the forms, we weren't collecting it this way. Now we are, so on and so forth, trying to at least get some cleanliness and cohesiveness to a move forward plan so that when you are ready to bring in a CDP or do that, that you have pivot points. We know we collect someone's LinkedIn. We ask them that in our form. We know and the more you can actually set that up for yourself, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, you're really the true expert here. I've seen that be an exercise that wasn't an exercise in futility. It actually was worth us taking the time to look at the different data sets and say, even if I can't connect them right this second, what am I getting from this source that I'm not getting from that source? And could I align them somehow in terms of, should I be getting that? Is that a field I'm not even collecting that I should be, right?
Let me pick up on that, Stefan. So, cause I think you're talking about how to get the data to harmonize.
Yes.
You have all these autonomous data sources, they're data islands. You want to be able to bring an analytical view, an integrative analytical view to it, but you've got to get the data to harmonize in the first place. Mark, can you speak a little bit to the technical and data challenges in getting to that harmonization?
Yeah, I was actually just about to say one of the things that you probably want to go through is a data readiness audit. What do you know about the data and the platforms that you have before you make this, giant decision to go spend, 6 figures on a platform with minimum of a 3-year term that may or may not be necessary, right? So there's going to be, those sorts of challenges related to what are you really trying to accomplish? Put that data component readiness score in play first. And then from a technical standpoint, what is the best solution for your current technology and marketing stack? Not just, hey, we love this one. It's the coolest one since sliced bread. Go implement this. That's not the right approach. And you're definitely going to be, turning it off after your 3-year term. You're not going to use it. So there's a couple of different variations related to just understanding your data. But from a technical component, once you have that kind of understanding, then you could say, okay, we need a data platform that will be able to unify our records and activate them back out to our email system. Or maybe you're trying to look at getting rid of your email system, or you want to upgrade your email system and you want to go with a platform that does both. Those all kind of come into play. And then the different vendors are going to have their own professional services. And then you're going to have companies like ours that help on a partner side that can come in and help supplement your team or help to understand skill set deficiencies. Maybe you just need to hire one or two data analysts as opposed to, having a partner come in. Pros and cons to having a partner. I've been, on the client side, had partners. I've been burned. I totally understand a lack of wanting to use a partner company. Pros and cons to all of it. But if you don't know what you don't know, at least work through a data readiness audit so that you have that basis of the starting point of your data journey, if you will.
Good. Let me jump in with one more. I'm going to stir one more pot, guys. We're running a little bit short on time. But, there's a whole set of tools that really aren't marketing platforms. They're data platforms. I'm thinking about, of course, AWS, Azure, GCS, data handling and ingestion tools like Fivetran. Would either of you have any comment or insights to share about, data solutioning using that class of tool set? Maybe not. I wanted
specifically, not necessarily specifically. I mean,
Snowflake. I mean, you mentioned Snowflake earlier.
Yeah.
Mark, so there's one step removed from those, but similar or related concept. Let's say that.
I would say it that way. They're all kind of related concepts, right? Like I didn't even say, even close to an exhaustive list of all the things. But I mean, just if you think about it, most people used to rely almost wholly on Google Analytics. Now that it's changed over to GA4, the whole world ended, right? Everybody hates GA4. They wish it would go back to the old way, yada, yada, yada. But there are a bunch of other platforms, like Mixpanel is a good one. Looker is a good one. ChartMogul, if you have a paid subscription business that connects with Stripe, that one's a great platform, being able to understand the different lifetime value, your revenue per month, how many subscribers you gain, how many subscribers you lost. That one's a great one. And coming back to it, good old Excel, right? Excel is, still kind of the king when it comes to not having a bunch of different platforms.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on the GA4/GA/Mixpanel because I lived in all three of them at the same time. And I'll say this. Yes, I feel the pain of GA4. I'm the one who's gonna, frankly, sorry for my French, bitch about it. I hate it. I think it didn't come out of the box the way it should, and you have to go do work to get back to the bare bones basics of what you previously had. That aside, I do think if you're going to go off and do a Mixpanel or do one of these things, make sure you have the resource that actually knows what they're doing. Like, we had someone fully devoted to Mixpanel, and they were insanely good. Like, everything you ever wanted to figure out with Mixpanel, there was the guy. And that guy was just the guy, right? And he was able to bring the level of understanding of the rest of the marketing department and everything up to where they needed to get to. But it's important to have that expert in-house if possible, if it's a long-term commitment you want to make, right? And I think that's the question of, in-house or out-house. No out-house puns, but you know what I mean. Like, if you're going to outsource, you have to decide, how pot committed, getting back to the betting, right? How pot committed is my company to this? I think if your executive team understands the fundamentals and it's not questioning whether the channels themselves can be valuable, it's questioning whether, or the digital, for example, is valuable to your company. We're not at that stage of maturity. We've gone further than that. They're now aware that there is that need. That need will not dissipate. Maybe where we place our bets will, but the need won't dissipate. So our ability to understand what the heck just happened doesn't go away. So to hire someone, because it's more when you hire talent versus spend treasure, it's a different commitment, right? Hiring talent to actually take that on, in my mind, is a true commitment of a business, because it's harder to just be like, we're giving up on data and we're getting rid of that guy. Technically, when a company is a good company, it should be harder to make that decision than it is, I'm cutting the contract with random product because it was a paper rate. So when you really look at that, getting someone in who knows their fill in the blank, I'm a New Yorker, it's really important to have that source of truth and that person who, because what's basically going to happen is you're going to go to the table, especially with a new technology, right? And you're going to bring that data to the table, and then it is going to get absolutely fired upon by every single exec in the room who either has politics in the game or just wants to test it, right? Is this really really the source of truth, right? And if you can't go back behind you and get that person and make sure they can back it up times two, trust is lost very quickly but earned very slowly.
Yes.
So keep that in mind when it comes to products and data, and the way in which, you bring that to the table to come in. But I think that commitment is incredibly important. I vote Mixpanel. I think they're great. I love seeing what they do, but they also have, you still want to take it and visualize it elsewhere. They're really good at funnels and really good at certain things. And then other things, they probably, could do a better job with multi-channel displays and things like that. So every one of them, to Mark's point, is going to have kind of its own value prop and pitfall. But I would honestly, when venturing into this, I would turn to the experts like Mark and others, and he didn't pay me to say that, but it's important to have someone guiding you through the process rather than hoping you didn't skip the left you should have taken at mile 2 and find yourself 10 miles down the road.
Good point. Hey, gentlemen, we're very short on time now. I think we're going to give it over to Tina to do a few wrap-up comments. Thank you for the insights here. Super good. And then I want to invite folks, if you have questions, we'll do a few wrap-up comments here, and then I think we can, whoever's interested, we can stay on, field questions, and take the discussion further. So, Tina, back to you.
Yeah, thanks for all these great insights. We've got a really great question that is very strategic, which is, what is the best way to convince companies of the value of a significant investment in these systems that can provide all the data? Is it understanding a lifetime customer value or increased sales, or is it something else?
I have an idea.
I'll let you go.
Okay, assuming we're dealing in digital only, we'll just make that a caveat that we're not trying to take the offline and the online and connect them. If we're dealing in digital only, I go and I find the overall number, right? What's that driving us right now? Okay. And then I try to find the point of obscurity. We don't know X and we don't know Y. Now, you can go two ways depending on your executive team and who you're trying to influence, right? So just like anything else, you have to know your audience. Should you be carrying a stick or a carrot? A stick situation would be saying, we currently have obscurity into this much of what actually causes the golden goose to lay the egg. The egg is worth X. If we're not able to justify what causes that to happen in the Rube Goldberg machine, the day that doesn't happen, we are behind the 8 ball without that golden egg, trying to figure it out. So that is more of a preventative, proactive kind of approach. Many companies aren't willing to always think proactively and spend proactively, but if you can put that context in front of them and say, listen, if we don't have the ability to understand this in full, and imagine the number of hours we'd have to do digging between 17 products, and you rattle off the 17 products. Okay, so think about what kind of time we'd have to do to just figure out what happened, let alone fix it. Or you flip it the other way and you show, market data that shows your competitors are actually succeeding and able to accomplish so much more and so on. And you say, listen, we're investing here. There's a funny one, the funny saying, right? I know my advertising works. I'm going to botch this thing, right? I just don't know which half, yes. Right? So I'm trying to help you understand which half so we can double down on that. Because the competitor, the reason, we have this true north. You want to get there. I want to help us get there. We're now using a carrot rather than a stick. But I think thinking of it in those contexts, making it really broad and really, if you get into the minutia of any given channel and you start digging in with an executive, you've probably gone down the wrong road. You're going to be discussing the minutia that isn't ultimately going to get you to where you need to be, right?
Stefan, that's such a great answer. Just a couple more questions. We're going to go back to the idea of churn. Mark, you were talking about churn prediction. And the question here is, how does that prediction affect the strategy that you have in working with customers?
I think it really comes to what your current nurture and engagement strategy is, or lack thereof. A lot of times what I've seen is that marketing teams are trying to get new people in. So they're not necessarily focused on the people that are already there. So from a strategic standpoint, those people that are already part of your paying subscriber base should be people that you should focus energy on. You can do better renewal campaigns. You can, again, this comes back to, you can even do a lot of this automated, right? You could say, okay, these people aren't coming back to the site within a certain amount of time. You could set up a automated campaign based on behavior and Zapier. If you need, just a quick integration tool, they could say, okay, this person has a visited website in X days, send them this notification, send them this message, or do a pop-up, somewhere if they do come to the site, say, hey, welcome back, we're glad you're here. Not just in the sense of getting them to come back to the site and just use it again. Give them a sense of inclusiveness, right? Say, okay, hey, we're glad you came back, and then maybe you could send them a follow-up. We noticed that you weren't here for a while. Is there something that we could do to make your experience better? Maybe they just weren't finding value anymore. Maybe they just forgot about you. Maybe they were on vacation. Who knows? But if you don't have those questions to qualify it, then you're just spitballing, and they're just going to churn anyway. So I think your strategy actually becomes a multifaceted strategy related to what you're trying to do with that churn prediction from that machine modeling.
Wow. That leads us to our last. Do you have anything to add to that, Stefan?
I was just going to say, such a good point. I look at acquisition as an hourglass, and the sand always goes to the bottom, especially when it's when you're a subscription business, for example, right? You can't afford to not be looking at that. And unfortunately, as you saw, CMOs are kind of being pushed and spending their money in that crowd the register, bring them in to Mark's point, rather than, if I can just get a better lifetime value out of what I've got, right? It's a lot easier to do that against a known audience than it is to go acquire an unknown audience, turn them into a known audience, and hope that you can actually do it all effectively, right? So I'm a big fan of that concept of churn is definitely dangerous. But again, this whole idea of people don't care once you get below the hourglass, like the second half of the hourglass, that drives me nuts, because I've just found so much gold in that ground, or that sand, I should say.
Yeah, that actually comes up to our last question, which is, how do you handle people who you don't know, the anonymous users that are on your site and browse your content with other content? What do you do with those folks that you don't know who they are?
So that is actually where a CDP kind of comes into play, or not even necessarily a CDP. You can have, for instance, HubSpot. You can actually put the HubSpot code on your site, and it'll follow people around too. What you want to do is the JavaScript that'll be running on your site, typically it's JavaScript, will give each of those anonymous users a unique identifier. So that unique ID could then be used with some of the tools to pop up a message, say, hey, sign up for free and, give us your email address and get our free newsletter. You want to be able to use that anonymous ID, or that unique ID, to understand who the anonymous users are and then convert them to a known user. Then you can potentially lead them down a different path based on different messages that you pop up, or personalization on your website or something like that. But any of the CDPs that I've worked with in HubSpot and Salesforce, they all have their own code that can end up being embedded into your site that can associate those unknown users, so that you have something to key in on. You have to have some identifier to key in on. And you can use those same traits, even if it's not email. It's like, okay, these people have come to the site 5 times because it's session based. If you don't go and clear your cookies and say you have your session in the code set for 60 days, 30 days, something like that, anytime that person comes back, even though they haven't logged in, they haven't given your email address, you can now still see their history and their behaviors, and you can use that for using a platform, say like Opt-in Monster. Okay, we want to pop up, HubSpot form. We'll put it in this Opt-in Monster and use these mechanisms saying that this person came back to the site, XYZ times, but they haven't given us their email address. Pop up a form. Do something like that. That's how you can really kind of change the ideation of understanding anonymous to known users, or getting them from anonymous to known users.
Yeah, we were able to do that really well with mixed panel, by the way. So I would just say, take a look at that as well, because we could see those unknown users. We could see their pattern. And then ultimately, in many cases, in order to do an action, they actually had to provide their email. So we were able to get that, tie that back, and then have that entire history of the person back to when they actually first made it. So the goal was to take as much of our anonymity away over time, because it would retroactively kick it back to the beginning of when we first engaged them, which was cool. So that's something to think through as well. I'm a big fan, like I said, of Mixpanel.
And you could always gate your content with an email wall.
True.
You could do that too.
Yeah.
So just be careful. From an SEO perspective, the SEO in the room is going to be like, be careful. You want that to be, if you want it to actually rank, you obviously don't want to try and gate that thing. But there is definitely, from a marketer's perspective, I'll tell you, like, the idea that a piece of content stays gated, maybe a webinar, for example, and then afterwards you bring it out from behind the wall because of its maybe, the freshness of the data, or, you've had it behind the wall for half a year. Time to move it out. You should have that actually built into your systems if you build that out.
Oh, that's great. Any last thoughts before we wrap up for the day?
Not necessarily for me. I know that we're way over time.
This has been great. I really appreciate you guys. You're such amazing experts, and your insights are so valuable. As we wrap up, just as a reminder, our next session is May 17th, and we'll be revisiting the pragmatic AI. We'll also be sending out an email. If you've registered, go ahead and look for an email for a recording and transcript of this session as well. Follow us on LinkedIn, stay in touch, and we'll be excited to see you next time. Thanks again for joining.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Everybody.
Thanks all.